I now give the floor to Ms. Jenna Russo.
Good morning, Excellencies. Thank you, Mr. President, for inviting the International Peace Institute to participate in today's discussion on the future of peace operations. I sometimes like to jest that throughout my nearly 17 years of working on UN peacekeeping, we seem to always be discussing how UN peace operations are at a turning point. However, this time, I think we really mean it. The last few years have presented the biggest inflection point we've seen since the 1990s. The combination of changing conflict dynamics, the UN's crisis of legitimacy in some field settings, geopolitics and financial constraints have required deep introspection and reconsideration of the role we want not only for peace operations, but for the broader UN peace and security pillar, and indeed the entire UN system. This process of reflection is important. We should question the way that peace operations work and their effectiveness in achieving the tenets of the Charter. At the same time, we are living in a liminal space that makes it difficult to plan for the future. At moments like this, it's important to remain tethered to the principles of the Charter and lessons from history that can help guide the way even in the midst of many unknowns. Within this context, I want to offer 3 points of reflection related to UN peace operations and broader reform of the UN peace and security architecture, particularly in the light of the review on the future of all forms of UN peace operations. First, we should situate the current crisis within the broader history of UN peace operations. In 2022 and 2023, amidst the riots in the DRC and the closure of the mission in Mali, there were many voices predicting the end of UN peacekeeping. Some suggested that all robust uniform presences could simply be shifted to regional actors, and many have cited the fact that the UN has not deployed any new peacekeeping operations in more than a decade, and the number of UN peacekeepers deployed globally has declined. These factors are taken by some to mean the final demise of UN peacekeeping. Even among more moderate voices, there is a sense that large-scale missions have fallen out of favor and should be replaced by lightweight or modular approaches. However, in taking a broader historical view, it's important to note that UN peace operations have always been deployed in ebbs and flows, and the current decline we're seeing is neither unprecedented nor likely permanent. The UN has experienced declines in peace operation deployments at multiple points in its history, often due to crises in the field or growing contestation over the size or cost of missions or the ambition of mission mandates. After the UN deployed ONUC, its first mission to the Congo in the 1960s, member states reared back from peacekeeping, due in part to ONUC's size and cost and the ambition of its mandate. In the 23 years that followed, the Council only authorized 5 missions, 4 of which were continuations of previous missions. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, the end of the Cold War ushered in a new wave of missions, with 22 UN peace operations deployed. Yet, just a few years later, crises in Angola, Somalia, Rwanda, and Bosnia created a crisis of confidence in peacekeeping. The number of UN peacekeepers dropped from nearly 80,000 in 1994 to only 12,000 in 1999. The trend reversed again in the early 2000s with a new slate of missions and an eventual historical high in the number of peacekeepers deployed. In his analysis of the decline of peace operations in the 1970s and 1980s, Paul Williams attributes the trend to geopolitics, low levels of consensus within the Council, divisions among the broader UN membership, financial crises, and a sense among some Western countries that the UN was becoming increasingly irrelevant. All factors that sound strikingly similar to today's dynamics. The lesson in this is that what we are facing is not unprecedented. To be sure, there are important differences between the dynamics of today and those of the 1980s. However, we must avoid a mindset of presentism in which we fail to consider broader historical trends and how they can help us to anticipate what may come in the future. Specifically, I would caution against deterministic thinking that supposes we have reached the end of one era of designing peace operations in favor of another. Even talk of reverting to so-called traditional forms of peace operations is ahistorical, as peace operations have never taken a single form. They have always been diverse and fluid, which is their strength and a sign of their adaptability. This lesson has important implications for UN 80 and efforts to increase the UN's efficiency. In reforming the UN, policymakers must take care not to eliminate parts of the system that could be essential for addressing crises of tomorrow. One of the UN's comparative advantages is its strong institutional knowledge and ability to effectively backstop a range of tasks across the peace operations and peace-building spectrum. This capability is not matched by any other actor, and it should not be discarded. Even if member states decide to move in the direction of more targeted or narrow mandates, no two mandates will look exactly the same, and the Secretariat will continue to be required to support diverse and complex tasks like the protection of civilians, community engagement, security sector reform, monitoring and reporting, and electoral support. While it may indeed be the case that current dynamics necessitate a smaller UN, any cuts or consolidation should be based on a careful analysis of the UN's unique added value across these areas vis-à-vis other partners, as well as the core capabilities required to maintain this value. The review on the future of peace operations could be one mechanism to help articulate these comparative advantages and the capabilities required to leverage them. Second, while UN reform and efforts to improve the practice of peace operations, including through the review, are no doubt necessary, it's important to be clear about what these efforts can and cannot achieve. One thing I have noticed over my time working on peace operations is that policymakers are often tempted to fill the wrong gaps or address existing problems with the wrong tools. Usually, this takes the form of member states trying to further improve the efficiency of peace operations to make up for political shortcomings. Peace operations may struggle to achieve their mandates because parties on the ground refuse to engage in a political process, or because the Council fails to provide missions with the political backing that they need. Yet rather than grappling with these problems, there is an assumption that what peace operations need to succeed are things like new technologies, better peacekeeping training, or improved data collection. In other words, we're trying to use technical tools to solve political problems. Over the past few decades, peace operations have become remarkably professionalized, and to be sure, we should continue seeking opportunities to improve performance in the field. However, member states must take responsibility for their role in ensuring the success of peace operations and not simply pass the buck to peacekeepers, expecting them to overcome gaping political deficits. When it comes to UN 80 and efforts to reform the peace and security pillar, we can no longer ask peace operations to do more with less. That moment has passed. We must grapple with how to do less with less, or perhaps more optimistically, how to do differently with less. This requires vision for what a smaller UN could achieve when it comes to maintaining international peace and security. Unfortunately, so far the UN 80 initiative does not seem to be guided by such a vision, and many member states have expressed reticence to undertake another long negotiation process following the Pact for the Future. Yet if member states do not articulate how they envision reform efforts making the UN more effective, cuts will be arbitrary, lacking in strategy, or driven by bureaucratic and political interests. A vision to guide UN 80 need not be created from scratch. Recent processes, including our common agenda, the new agenda for peace, the Pact for the Future, and the ongoing reviews on peace operations and the peace-building architecture, all provide pieces that can form the basis of such a vision. At the International Peace Institute, we stand by ready to support member states in ensuring that the reform process helps to strengthen the UN's ability to serve the global community and uphold the Charter. Third, in the midst of political and financial pressures, some member states have begun suggesting that UN peace operations should get, quote, back to basics. Is this a good idea? Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that the UN should recover and strengthen its use of preventive diplomacy. The UN's role in preventive diplomacy was first articulated by Dag Hammarskjöld in 1960, and he used it to prevent and manage conflict, including through the deployment of peace operations. Many peacekeeping and special political missions continue to undertake this sort of political engagement on a day-to-day basis. But while Secretary General Guterres called for a boost in preventive diplomacy and a greater use of good offices in the new agenda for peace, the UN has been absent or marginalized across many of today's most pressing crises. In past crises, it would have been unthinkable for the UN not to be at the table helping to broker peace. As IPI President Zeid Ra'ad Al Hussein stressed in his briefing to the Council in July, what is needed is activated and inspired leadership to overcome political barriers, not only by the Secretary General, but also by member state diplomats and senior leaders. In this sense, we should return to basics and the approach taken by Hammarskjöld, who, as Zaid said, never for a moment believed that there was no political role for the UN, nor thought he could not do anything because of geopolitical divisions. At the same time, the message of going back to basics is being instrumentalized by some to undermine the UN's work in areas like human rights, protection, and gender. Not only are these values at the heart of the UN Charter, but they are also strategically important to peace and the implementation of peace operations mandates. When missions fail to meet the needs of everyday individuals, they lose the trust of local communities and struggle to achieve their political objectives. As I said the last time I had the pleasure of briefing this Council, broader peace-building activities like community engagement, strengthening state-society relations, human rights, and gender are not simply nice to have. They are necessary to build sustainable peace. This does not mean that each of these tasks has to be implemented by UN peacekeepers, and finding ways to strengthen partnerships with the broader UN family and other actors is a step in the right direction. However, financial efficiency must not be used as an excuse to eliminate peace-building imperatives. To conclude, in today's climate, it is easy to feel lost amid all the challenges taking place. The fatigue of swimming upstream against an endless barrage of challenges can plant doubts that we're ever able to make a difference. So it's important to remember that for thousands of people, the presence of the UN can literally mean the difference between life and death. UN peace operations are a vital tool in collective security, and despite the current challenges, the UN can emerge from this moment stronger and better able to serve the global community. But it won't happen automatically. It requires vision, strong and creative diplomacy, and a relentless commitment to deliver on the Charter. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Ms. Russo for her briefing.